when word got out that I was going to interview you, lots of people called me up and stopped me in the street and said, look, I want you to ask the president this, I want you to ask him that. But it all centered around the economy.
Really? Interesting.
That was big. And then the last chapter in your book is about the meltdown in the economy.
Correct.
I thought it was a very interesting chapter. But here's what I don't understand, a lot of other people don't understand. Why didn't you, as President of the United States, know that this derivative mortgage-backed security con was in motion? Because you say, it's a very honest book, you wrote an honest book. I was caught by surprise.
True. And I think there is an awareness in that last chapter that we saw something amiss because we tried to get the government to regulate Fannie and Freddie. But I don't know of anybody in my administration who saw the enormity of the collapse. It's important for the reader to understand that that in 2003, because of the implicit government guarantee and because we were worried about some of the investments that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were making, that Congress, just, much to our chagrin, said, no, we're not going to regulate. And it's because they're very powerful entities. And so, to some extent, I feel okay about anticipated crisis. The other thing, I didn't really see the enormity of it. I really didn't. And I don't think this was a matter of regulation. I think this was a matter of people making bad investments.
Okay, but the problem is, for me, and I think millions of people watching, that we expect the federal government to protect us from con men. And
Yeah.
this was a con. It was a giant con. Now, you're the guy in charge of the SEC, Christopher Cox, who I know very well because I went to school in Boston with him, okay? Now, Cox is a guy that's supposed to give you the heads up that, hey, there's something really not right here.
Well, I think at a lot of levels of government, we didn't
didn't
see it
happen.
Coming. No, we didn't. And
It was almost like 9/11.
Well, the question is, what do you do about it when you're the president? I mean, it's one thing to be dwelling on why we didn't get it right. But in my case, the story is, what do you do when somebody says it's about to fail? That being the economy is about to fail. And there's a tone in the book that basically says I distrusted Wall Street. And I probably because I was raised in West Texas. And yet, I had to make the decision to use your money
To bail them out.
to bail them out. Yeah.
But
because the options for me were, do I gamble on a depression or not?
Right, and I think most Americans reading the book would come to the same conclusion. I certainly did. When you did it, I read your face. Look, this is our fourth conversation. I don't know you well, but I know you a little. When I saw you out there going, hey, this thing is serious, I went, this thing is serious.
It was
right?
serious, but your question is, why didn't we see it?
Yeah.
It was.
But that frightens me, because it could happen again. It could happen again.
Of course it could happen again, and it's happened before. In other words, if you have a marketplace, sometimes there are excesses in the marketplace. This was a confluence of events, and so I try to take the reader through the trade deficits, the money coming to the
There was
country,
a
the
lot of things
investments,
going
the
on.
building of the house of cards. The assumption was, by a lot of investors, that the price of housing would continue to go up. It didn't, and the house of cards started
Boom.
to crumble.
But
And so
here-
your question is, how come we didn't anticipate it? Well, to a certain extent, we did, and that is trying to deal with one aspect of the housing market, and that would be Fannie and Freddie. And I was unsuccessful at getting them regulated.
But there's more to it than that, Mr. President, with all due respect. Did you see my interview with Barney Frank when I called him a coward?
Yeah.
Okay, well, but because he had direct oversight of Fannie and Freddie.
Well, but see, it's like saying, how come you didn't see the shysters like Madoff ahead of time?
That's different, though,
Well,
because
but
he's a
shysters-
private guy, and Wall Street is dealing in the public sector. Look, Barney Frank came on my program, and 3 months after he said, there's no problem with Fannie and Freddie going forward. That was July of 08. And then I said to him, and he goes, I didn't say that, and that's why I laced them.
Yeah.
Here's my problem.
Okay.
Americans are losing confidence in their government. We saw that with President Obama in the last election.
Right.
They're losing confidence in their leadership. Am I wrong?
I hope they don't lose confidence in their government. I can see why there's skepticism, but it's the only government we got. And the fundamental question is, will the government respond to their demands? And that's what democracy is all about. Look, here's the question, as far as I'm concerned, is what do we do? And the danger is that we overregulate. And I don't think the marketplace functions well with a lot of over-regulation. And,
Okay. Now, you say in your book that you had to bail out the companies and spend $1 trillion to do it, and I believe
well, it
you.
wasn't that much, but go ahead.
Well, in the end, it'll come to that.
Well, TARP wasn't that much.
Right.
Yeah.
And then President Obama picks up your theme and says it almost the same words. I had to continue spending because we would have gotten to a depression. So you and President Obama are simpatico. The problem is that there's $5 trillion added to the debt in the last 3 years, from 2007 to 2010.
All I can tell you is when I left office, the debt to GDP ratio was lower than President 42, President 41, and almost equal to President 40. That would be Ronald Reagan. And I really have chosen not to second guess the president, which you're trying to get me to do.
No, I'm not.
I can only
No, you're
explain,
wrong.
I can only explain to you.
No, but you're
I can
wrong.
only explain to you the decisions I made.
Am I allowed to say that a sitting or a foreign president is wrong? I'm not trying to get you to bash
Of course you
Obama,
can say that,
all right?
But let me finish what I'm saying on the TARP. Now, you're trying to get me to comment on the policies.
This is an extension of your policy into the arena today.
Actually, that's not necessarily the case. The TARP that we passed said that we're going to put money into financial institutions, which will be repaid to the taxpayer with a reasonable rate of return. And most of the TARP money that we spent under my watch has been repaid. We solved the problem of a financial meltdown, and the money has been returned.
Then why, and you don't have to bash President Obama, is the government, the federal government now, continuing to bail people?
You need to ask him, not me. I'm the retired guy. I'm the guy who has done my job, and I'm now home in Texas.
But you must have a theory on it.
You're trying to drag me into the current affairs, and I don't want to be dragged into the current affairs. And I appreciate the effort, but I am mindful that no matter what I say about the current state of affairs, it will be contrasted to my predecessor's decisions. And I don't think it's good. Hear me out. I don't think it's good for a former president to be criticizing his successor.
But here's the
and not
problem
only that,
for the
I
folks.
don't want to be.
I know you
in
don't.
the arena.
But here's the problem for
criticizing
the
my
folks.
successor.
The folks live in the country, and your policies in Iraq, Afghanistan, economically bleed over until 2010. What you started and what you were involved with didn't end when you left. It continues. So that people, when they get an opportunity to hear you and read your book, they want to know about the current state of affairs. They don't want to say, look, it ended when he left, and now I don't know what he thinks.
That's your job as somebody who is capable of getting people from the administration to explain the current state of affairs. I've written a book so that people get a sense of what it was like to make the decisions that I made during my presidency. And beyond that, I'm happy to get off the stage. I'm very comfortable with this fact, Bill.
What about all your knowledge?
I'm very comfortable with this fact, that eventually there will be an objective historians that will analyze my presidency, but there needs to be time. And in terms of my knowledge, there are plenty of knowledgeable people who are capable of speaking out. And I know this comes as a shock to some, but I have zero desire to be in the limelight except for this brief moment.
No, I understand.
When I'm willing to talk with my friend in order to sell books.
I got it. All right, one more question on this, and we'll go into something else that I feel is very interesting and important. And again, I'm asking you because people today are worried. Americans are worried. They're worried about themselves, their families, and their country.
And that worry was expressed at the polls.
Right. But they're concerned. And when they get an opportunity to hear someone like you, who is in the middle of it, they want to hear what you have to say. And I respect the fact that you don't want to get into the swamp.
Not to be argumentative, but the best way for them to learn to what I'd have to say is to read my book.
Read the book. Okay, but again, it carries through. Now, the present administration has dumped a lot of stuff on you. They say, look, it's not our fault because the previous administration, they did X, Y, and Z. I know you don't care about that.
I really don't.
You don't care about that at all.
It's a tactic.
It's a political ploy, correct?
Some people choose to use them. Some people use that ploy. Some don't. And
now, Jimmy Carter, he gets furious when people dump on him, and he fights back. You've seen it. He has books, too. Tons of books. But you are the total opposite.
I am the total opposite.
They could call you the devil. They could call you whatever, and you're just going to go out to lunch.
Well, they did when I was president.
And we talked about
and I
that.
didn't. Well, that's right, we did, and I didn't respond because I don't think it's good for the presidency to respond. And I know it's hard for you to believe that I basically ignore the rhetoric, but I do, and I'm comfortable with myself. I know I gave it my all for the country. I did the very best I could do as the president, and I'm comfortable with that.
Coming up, President Bush discusses the war in Afghanistan and the growing threat of Iran.
Continuing now with my interview with President Bush. When you look at the current state of the union, because I know, as far as following the country, I know you do. You couldn't be a civil servant your whole life and then just say, I
Well, I was a civil
golf.
servant my whole life. Another reason to read
No,
the
I know
book.
you're a businessman, but governor of Texas and two-term president. I mean, you just can't shut it off.
Right. I don't shut it off. I
no,
love my country.
You
Yeah.
watch. Are you optimistic about America?
Yes,
right
I
now?
am. No, oh, right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always optimistic about America. I've studied a lot of history. We've been through difficult periods in the past, and we'll come through this difficult period. And
So
I'm optimistic about
you
our
believe the economy is going to turn around and people are going to be better off?
country. I can't
soon?
tell you when. Oh, well, that's a leading question, of course, which you're famous for. But the economy will turn around soon. Well, what's the definition of soon? And frankly, what my advice to you would be to ask somebody who thinks they know what they're talking about the economy. I'm not
Today.
an economist. I'll tell you this. Okay, I'll give you this. I think it's important for policymakers to understand most new jobs are created by small businesses. 70% of new jobs in America are created by small businesses. Many small businesses pay income tax at the individual rate, and therefore raising any income taxes will cause there to be less capital available for small businesses, which will make it harder to create jobs.
Thank you. That's what the folks, I think, want to hear. Afghanistan. Now, this is a horror over there, okay? It's a horror because our people are over there. Karzai is corrupt. The thing may go either way. We got a brilliant General Petraeus. And people are going, oh, we get $13 trillion debt. Now we're spending $1 trillion in Afghanistan. Are you optimistic about Afghanistan?
It's going to take time, but I think the mission is necessary. And remember, this is the place from which attacks were launched that killed 3,000 of our people.
We know the rationale.
No, I know. No, but there's other rationale, like human rights for women. And the fundamental question for those who say get out is, are we willing to live with the fact that people will live under unspeakable violence?
A lot of Americans are willing to do that.
Well, then I'm not.
But are
So
you
know.
optimistic that we can defeat?
Yes. I'm optimistic that democracy will ultimately prevail, just like I'm optimistic democracy will prevail in Iraq. I'm not optimistic if we leave.
Iran.
Yes.
One of the things that you said in the book, and again, the book is a very honest book. It is.
Thank you.
All right? You said, I felt bad because I left that unresolved problem on the table.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't resolve it, right?
Right. And it's getting worse. Are you optimistic that the United States and the rest of the civilized world can keep those people from getting a nuclear weapon?
Well, in the book, I talked about two clocks. The regime change clock and the slow down the weapons clock.
Right.
And policy has got to be directed toward speeding up one and slowing down the other. And I'm optimistic that countries, as a result of my leadership and the leadership of President Obama, understand the stakes, and that people understand that without attention and without applying pressure, Iran could end up with a bomb.